used to work at a small-town gas station in a place called Maplewood. This wasn't just any gas station. It was one of the last remaining 24-hour establishments in our area. The convenience of always being open made it a popular spot for night owls, truckers, and the occasional odd character. For me, the night shift was a necessity, not a choice. With a child to care for and bills piling up, I needed every penny I could earn, which meant working from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. My days were spent in a blur of sleep, childcare, and a second job, leaving me perpetually exhausted. Maplewood was a small, sleepy town, nestled in the heart of rural America. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, and the pace of life is slow and steady. The gas station itself sat on the outskirts of town, a beacon of light in the darkness for miles around. It was a typical winter night, the air biting and crisp, with a blanket of snow covering the ground. The streets were quiet, with most people hunkered down in their warm homes. That night, like many others, I arrived at work to find a few lingering customers inside, grabbing snacks or fueling up for a long drive. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting a pale glow over the rows of shelves stocked with everything from chips to motor oil. The hum of the refrigerators and the occasional beep of the cash register were the only sounds breaking the stillness of the night. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the crowd thinned out, leaving the store nearly empty. The night shift was usually quiet, giving me plenty of time to restock shelves, clean up, and occasionally chat with the few regulars who came in during the late hours. But the peaceful routine of the night was often disrupted by the presence of some truly strange characters. It was around midnight when I first noticed him. I was in the snack aisle, stacking bags of chips, when a man walked past. He was nondescript at first glance, with curly hair and a bulky black backpack slung over his shoulder. Something about him seemed off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. He stopped at the end of the aisle, glancing in my direction before pretending to browse the snacks. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, feeling a slight unease. He lingered for a moment before approaching me, asking where the restroom was. His voice was low and gravelly, and he avoided making eye contact. I pointed him in the right direction, and he thanked me before slowly walking away. As he left, I noticed his peculiar waddling gait. Once he was out of sight, I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling and continued my work. But he didn't stay gone for long. As I moved between aisles, restocking shelves, I noticed him walking past repeatedly, always glancing my way. He wasn't carrying anything, and he hadn't used the restroom. He just wandered around with that bulging backpack, his presence becoming increasingly unsettling. By the time he approached me again, I was on edge. He started with a compliment, saying he had been watching me and thought I was beautiful. His breath was foul, and he stood too close for comfort. I forced a polite smile and thanked him, hoping he would leave, but he persisted. He began asking personal questions, where I was from, if I had a boyfriend. I lied about everything, feeling a growing sense of dread. When he asked for my number, I told him I was seeing someone, hoping it would deter him, but he insisted there was no harm in being friends. Desperate to get rid of him, I gave him a fake number. He made a creepy comment before finally walking away, looking smug as if he had won some sort of prize. I thought that was the end of it, but hours later, my coworker called me on the walkie-talkie, saying there was a creepy guy asking for me. My heart sank. I told her to say I wasn't there and made a beeline for the back room, planning to hide out for a while. The back room of the gas station was a small, cramped space filled with shelves of extra stock, cleaning supplies, and a few old chairs. It was a place where employees could take a quick break, grab a snack, or just get away from the store floor for a few minutes. I sank into one of the chairs, my mind racing. Moments later, the door swung open, and the man walked in, his face twisted with anger. He yelled that I had given him a fake number, his voice echoing in the small room. I felt a jolt of fear and told him he couldn't be back there, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He dropped his backpack on the table and started unzipping it, his eyes fixed on me. Panic surged through me as I realized I didn't want to find out what was in that bag. I bolted past him, running through the store as fast as I could. He chased me, but I managed to get outside to my car. As I started the engine, I saw him exit the store, looking for me. He was moving slowly, almost sluggishly, and I wondered if he was on something. He spotted my car, but it was too late. I was already driving away, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I called my manager, explaining what had happened and telling him I couldn't stay there that night. He told me he would call the police and review the camera footage, but he also said he needed me to come back to work. I was adamant about not returning that night, and eventually he understood. He promised to handle the situation and said I needed to come back the next night. The next day, I was still shaken. My manager assured me that the police had been notified and that they had the surveillance footage. But the fear lingered. I returned to work the following night, but I was constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting the man to reappear. The experience left a lasting impact on me. I had met many strange people working that job, but none had scared me as much as he did. The memory of his angry face and that ominous backpack haunted me, and I was grateful I never found out what he was reaching for. The small-town gas station, once a place of routine and familiarity, had become a setting for my worst nightmare. Working at the gas station was a necessity, not a choice. It was my second job, taken to make ends meet after moving into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. The place was quiet, except for the occasional rush during peak hours. Most nights, it was just me, the flickering fluorescent lights and the hum of the coolers. I'd work the evening shift, from dusk till close. Sometimes I manned the register, ringing up purchases of cigarettes, snacks, and fuel. Other times, I'd be outside cleaning windshields or restocking shelves. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. One chilly autumn evening, as I was stacking shelves near the coffee station, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Startled, I turned around to see a familiar face smiling at me. Casey, my ex-girlfriend. She shouldn't have known I worked here. We hadn't spoken in months, not since I blocked her on every platform to escape her relentless calls and messages. "Hey, fancy seeing you here," she said with a sly grin as if nothing was amiss. My heart raced. "What are you doing here, Casey?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged casually. "Oh, heard through the grapevine that you were here. Thought I'd drop by." There was no grapevine. None of my friends would have told her. My mind raced with questions, but I pushed them aside, trying to stay calm. "Well, it's nice to see you, but I'm working," I said, hoping she would take the hint. Casey's smile faltered, replaced by a look of hurt and frustration. It's messed up how you shut me out like this, blocking me on everything." Her voice was low, but I could sense the anger simmering beneath the surface. I glanced around nervously, aware of the few customers browsing the aisles, oblivious to the tension building between us. "Casey, we've been through this," I said, keeping my tone firm but calm. "I needed space. You weren't giving it to me." She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "And showing up at your workplace? That's not weird to you?" I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. "Look, I have to get back to work. Please, just leave." For a moment, I thought she might argue, but then her expression softened, and she nodded curtly. "Fine," she muttered, turning away. "But this isn't over." As she walked out of the store, I let out a sigh of relief. The encounter had shaken me, but I pushed it to the back of my mind, focusing on my tasks for the remainder of my shift. Closing time came around, and I bid farewell to the last customer, locking the doors behind them. The night air was crisp and cool as I walked to my car, parked in the dimly lit lot beside the station. I glanced around nervously, half expecting to see Casey lurking in the shadows. When I arrived home, My roommate Paul's car was already in the driveway. I parked next to him and went inside, eager to unwind after a long day. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. I headed straight for the kitchen, intent on fixing a late-night snack. As I microwaved a frozen dinner, I couldn't shake the unease that lingered from my encounter with Casey. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see her standing in the doorway. After eating, I retreated to the living room, sinking into the worn couch in front of the TV. I turned on a video game, trying to lose myself in the mindless action on the screen. But my mind kept drifting back to Casey and the unsettling feeling she left behind. Hours passed, and exhaustion finally caught up with me. I switched off the console and headed to bed, hoping sleep would offer some respite from the day's events. But as I lay in bed, drifting in and out of a restless sleep, I was suddenly jolted awake by a sound, a faint creak, followed by the sensation of cool air brushing against my face. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding in my chest. I sat up slowly, scanning the darkened room. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting eerie shadows across the walls. That's when I noticed it. The bedroom door was ajar. Fear clenched my stomach as I realized I hadn't left it open. Paul always went to bed early and never ventured into my room. I reached for the bedside lamp, casting a dim glow around the room. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, fingers fumbling as I dialed Paul's number. No answer. Panic rising, I crept out of bed, moving cautiously toward the bedroom door. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding in my ears. The apartment was silent, but the air felt charged with tension. I checked the front door. It was locked. I glanced toward Paul's closed bedroom door, debating whether to wake him. Then I remembered. The spare key. We kept it hidden outside under a potted plant near the front entrance. It was a precaution in case we ever got locked out. But now the thought of it sent a chill down my spine. I tiptoed down the hall, trying to be as quiet as possible. I reached the front door and knelt beside the plant, heart racing. My fingers brushed against the cold ceramic pot, and I lifted it carefully. But the key wasn't there. Panic surged through me as I checked again, frantically searching the surrounding area. It was gone. Someone had taken it, or moved it. And suddenly, I knew who. Adrenaline coursing through my veins, I hurried back inside, locking the front door behind me. My mind raced as I considered my options. I needed to get to Paul, to wake him before whoever was in the apartment did. But as I turned toward Paul's room, I froze. The knife. It was missing from its usual place in the kitchen. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what had happened. Casey had followed me home, and she was inside the apartment. Heart pounding, I grabbed a heavy book from the shelf and crept toward Paul's closed bedroom door. I could hear faint rustling from inside, accompanied by soft whispers. My hands shook as I gripped the doorknob, preparing to confront whoever, or whatever, was on the other side. With a sudden burst of courage, I threw the door open, book raised defensively. "Paul!" I shouted, voice trembling with fear. Paul sat up in bed, eyes wide with confusion. What's going on?" Before I could respond, a series of loud bangs echoed from behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat, as Casey's voice filled the hallway. "I'm sorry. Let's talk." She was on the other side of Paul's bedroom door, pounding on it with a force that sent tremors through the frame. I lunged forward, slamming the door shut and pressing my weight against it. "Call the police," I shouted at Paul, who fumbled for his phone on the bedside table. Panic surged through me as Casey continued to hammer on the door, her voice growing more desperate with each blow. "I just want to talk," she cried, her tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Please, just let me explain." But I knew better. I had seen the knife, felt the fear in my gut when I realized she was in the apartment. There was no reasoning with her. Not anymore. Minutes felt like hours as I held the door, every second stretching into eternity. Paul spoke in hushed tones with the dispatcher, relaying our address and the situation unfolding inside our apartment. Help was on the way, but it couldn't come soon enough. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the night air. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows as police cars screeched to a halt outside. I heard voices, muffled commands, and then the heavy thud of boots on the front porch. "Police! Open the door!" a voice shouted from the other side. Relief washed over me as I released the door, stumbling back into the hallway. Paul joined me, his expression a mix of fear and bewilderment as we watched the scene unfold. The door swung open, revealing two officers with guns drawn. They entered the room cautiously, scanning the area for any sign of danger. And then, there she was, Casey, standing in the hallway, her hands raised in surrender. "Drop the knife," one of the officers commanded, voice firm but calm. Casey hesitated for a moment, her eyes locked on mine. And then, slowly, she lowered the knife to the ground. Tears streaked her face as she sank to her knees, trembling with fear and emotion. "I just wanted to talk," she whispered, voice choked with tears. "I just wanted to explain." The officers moved forward, placing Casey in handcuffs and leading her away. I watched in stunned silence as they escorted her out of the apartment, her cries echoing down the hallway. Later at the police station, I gave my statement, recounting the events of the night with a sense of disbelief. Casey was charged with burglary and attempted assault, a stark reminder of how close I had come to danger. In the days that followed, I moved out of the apartment, unable to shake the memories of that terrifying night. Casey was sentenced to prison, her actions branded as a desperate attempt to regain control. But there was still a lesson for me. Growing up in a quiet suburban neighborhood had its perks and its downfalls. For me, a 14-year-old with a penchant for independence, it was a mix of safe familiarity and stifling monotony. Our house was situated in a cozy cul-de-sac, with neighbors who knew each other by name and kids who grew up playing in the same backyards. My best friend Emily lived just a few blocks away, and we spent countless afternoons exploring the nooks and crannies of our small world. The neighborhood was bordered by a small strip mall, a relic from the 80s that had seen better days. Most of the shops were either closed or barely hanging on, but the gas station at the far end was still a bustling spot. It was a 15-minute walk from my house, and I often went there to buy snacks or small items, especially when I needed a break from the confines of home. The gas station had a certain charm to it, despite its rundown appearance. The old neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. Inside, the aisles were cramped with shelves full of snacks, drinks, and random knickknacks. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Linda, always greeted me with a warm smile, and the regulars were familiar faces. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at school, I decided to take a walk to the gas station. It was late November, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. I slipped on my coat, popped in my AirPods, and set out into the twilight. The streets were quiet, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves underfoot. I relished the solitude, losing myself in my music as I made my way to the gas station. The gas station was relatively empty when I arrived. A couple of cars were parked at the pumps, their owners inside paying or grabbing a quick snack. I headed straight for the snack aisle, eager to find something to take my mind off the day. As I browsed the shelves, I felt a presence next to me. Glancing over, I saw an older man standing a little too close for comfort. He was short, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and glasses. His clothes were unremarkable, but something about him set off alarm bells in my head. He seemed to be saying something, but with my AirPods in, I couldn't hear him. Reluctantly, I took one out and asked, "Are you talking to me?" He smiled, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. "Yes, sorry to bother you. I was just saying my daughter loves those same chips you're holding." I nodded politely, hoping that would be the end of it. But he didn't move. Instead, he continued, "You're about the same age as her. How old are you?" 14, I replied, my voice tinged with annoyance. He grinned wider. What a wonderful age, so mature but still so young. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, realizing we were alone in the aisle. I started to edge away, but he followed. "What's your name?" he asked. For some reason, perhaps out of sheer habit, I told him, "Katie." "That's a beautiful name," he said, his eyes gleaming. "My favorite name for a girl." I felt a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. I needed to get out of there. "I should go," I muttered, turning to leave. He stepped closer. "Which school do you go to, Katie?" I hesitated, then lied. "I'm not from around here. Just visiting my cousin." He frowned, his eyes narrowing. "I've seen you here before. Are you sure you're not from around here?" Panic surged through me. I didn't know what to say, so I simply turned and walked quickly to the cashier. Linda gave me a curious look as I paid for my chips, but I didn't stop to explain. I just wanted to get out of there. I left the gas station and walked quickly through the strip mall, hoping to lose him. The sky had darkened, and the parking lot was dimly lit by flickering streetlights. I could feel his eyes on me, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. When I glanced back, he was following me. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, ducking into the convenience store at the end of the strip mall. The cashier, a young woman not much older than me, looked up in surprise as I hurried in. "A man is following me," I blurted out. "I don't know him." Her eyes widened, and she glanced toward the door. "Stay here," she said. "I'll call the manager." I nodded, my breath coming in short gasps. I could see the man through the store's glass window standing just outside. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. Then he called my name, softly but insistently. "Katie." Fear gripped me. I backed away from the window, feeling trapped. The cashier returned with an older man who I assumed was the manager. He took one look at me and understood the situation. "Stay here," he said firmly. "We'll make sure he doesn't come in." Other customers in the store had started to notice. A kind-looking couple approached me. "Are you okay, dear?" the woman asked, concern etched on her face. I shook my head, tears welling up. "He's been following me since the gas station." The man's face hardened. "We'll wait with you until your mom gets here." My mom arrived a few minutes later, her face pale with worry. I ran to her, feeling a rush of relief. The couple and the store manager assured her they'd keep an eye out for the man, but he had already disappeared into the night. We drove home in silence, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. I felt a lingering sense of fear, knowing that the man was still out there somewhere. I vowed never to go to that gas station alone again. The incident changed me. I became more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. The neighborhood that once felt so safe now seemed filled with hidden dangers. I avoided the strip mall, preferring to stay within the familiar confines of my home and school. I often thought about that man, wondering who he was and what his intentions were. The memory of his smile, his unsettling words, haunted my dreams. I hoped he had been caught and taken off the streets, but a part of me knew I might never feel completely safe again. Over time, the fear faded, but it never entirely disappeared. It lingered in the back of my mind, a reminder of how quickly a seemingly ordinary day could turn into a nightmare. And though I moved on with my life, I never forgot the lessons I learned that night. To trust my instincts, to stay vigilant, and to never underestimate the darkness that can lurk behind a friendly smile.